starring
Mike Murray.
This is SNL.
SNL By The Numbers.
Numbers.
Smart choice for 50. 13-minute cold open. Lauren loves the ratings. There's the opening haiku for you. We are back. Season 50 and Season 5 of SNL By The Numbers, the home of SNL stats. I am your host, Mike Murray. Tonight we are covering episode 969 of Saturday Night Live, the premiere of Season 50, hosted by Gene Smart, musical guest Jelly Roll. We are a presentation of LateNighter.com. I am kicking off the season, as always, with my main man, the quintessential Quebecois, Jon Schneider. How are you, dude?
Bonjour, Mike. Great to see you. Happy to be back on your show for the first time this season. I'm so excited because I got to cover the show a couple times on the Hot Take Show on the Roundtable, but I've been dying to talk about the cast members as individuals and, how they're going to do this season, because I feel like there's never been a season where there's more pressure on the cast to really, put out their best work on the show. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Want to wish all my Jewish friends out there Shana Tova, Happy New Year. So excited to be here to celebrate with both of you.
All right, we're less than 2 minutes in. We got 3 languages spoken on By The Numbers this season. And a lot of pressure on the cast, but also a lot of pressure on the SNL statisticians, because everybody wants to know precedent and context and when have we seen this before? And we're going to get people from years and years ago, which we did this week. But before we do any of that, I am so pleased to introduce someone making his SNN debut, if you can believe it. You may have heard him on the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. Brad Robinson joins us tonight on By The Numbers. How is Season 50 finding you?
Hey, fellas, how are you? Season 50 is finding me great. Loving it so far in this early weeks of the season. And we were talking before we started rolling. I'm just so excited to talk about a modern episode of Saturday Night Live with somebody.
Yeah, and for anyone who's never heard of your podcast, tell them what you do cover on your show.
The Not Ready for Primetime podcast, we're covering the early years of SNL, the first 5 seasons. So we actually just finished the Season 3 finale, and if anybody hasn't listened to our show, John has been on several times. John has been on every time we've had Buck Henry on. So John just had his 6th appearance on our show, finishing up Season 3. We go through week by week, episode by episode. We started with Season 1, Episode 1, and we're going all the way through for the first full 5 seasons.
Perfect timing for 50 to get where you are now, and with the Saturday Night movie coming out and all that. So people are thirsty for the SNL history, and that's why you come to shows like these. So all right, let's kick it off. So before we even dive into the premiere, let's talk about going into the premiere and our expectations for it, what happened from a stat-wise, position. So when we do this show, we do it every week, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. after a live show. Last year and years before, we'll do a postseason show. We go through every cast member and their entire stat sheet for the year. So Bill Kenny joined John and I. We went through them all in the Power Rankings, and we're going to talk about that stat. It's the ultimate SNL stat, but it takes into consideration all the stats we do. But I want to look at last year's ranking before we even dive in, because let's see where we came from. So if you're looking at the screen, we have last year's Power Rankings, and something weird happened in the offseason, John. Can you tell people what happened in the offseason with the cast shakeup?
So you're Nostradamus, and you make predictions sometimes, and you nailed every single one of these, because unfortunately, our bottom 3 Power Rankings getters from last season, the ultimate stat that you've come up with, were not either asked back or decided not to return for Season 50. So as an indication of success on the show, this was one that was pretty accurate.
And I will say thank you for the comment of, being Nostradamus of SNL. And I called the Jim Gaffigan casting that we saw. That was exciting for me. I did predict Tim Walz would be the running mate for Kamala Harris. That was exciting. But for this stat, I will take no credit other than creating the stat, but the numbers don't lie. So it had nothing to do with my interpretation. It has everything to do with the stat. So we had Mikey Day, Heidi Gardner, Bowen Yang at the top three of the cast. Bottom three, Punky Johnson was in 15th, Chloe Trost in 16th, and Molly Carney in 17th. So Brad, as somebody who looks at the old cast, tell me what you think about the new cast, and what were your initial takes that 3 cast members had left the show before this milestone year?
I was kind of I was kind of glad 3 people left, because I've always said there's way too many people on the cast. And spending so much time on the old seasons, I actually do like when the cast are smaller and you get to, if for nothing else, you get in theory a chance to see people more often. The chance for exposure is greater. Of the 3 that left, I was bummed. I really liked Punky, and I thought she was starting to get featured on the show a bit more, and I was actually hoping to watch her a little bit more. I think just, as your numbers show, just her, but especially Chloe and Molly just didn't get the time to really get that impression and leave the mark that I think I know a lot of people wanted.
Mike, you're muted just so we can hear you.
I think we went into the year thinking everyone that's in the cast in 49 is going to want to come back. So in some cases, they don't have that choice, or maybe they have other projects that they want to do. But the stats came out with Punky at 51 appearances, 37 and a half minutes of screen time. Chloe at 47 appearances, 44 minutes, 25 of screen time. So a little bit more than Punky. And Molly at 40 appearances and 23, almost 24 minutes of screen time. So we'll talk about the current cast of season 50 at the end of the night, and we'll explain how these stats work and how they all join together to make this one number. But just wanted to set the table, as we had 3 in, 3 out. So sorry, Brad, we're still at 17 cast members. So hopefully we get to know everybody, though.
It is a lot. There are a lot of people on this cast.
And it must be especially jarring for you, Brad, because you're regularly covering a show that has 7 cast members. So this is, more than, it's like 2.5 times what you normally see on the show. So I could imagine it is pretty jarring to jump back and forth between 1978 and 2024.
Yeah, it's not so much jarring. It's more of a bummer. Like, because there's so many talented people there. And there's just, Mike, you can obviously do the math. Like, there's X amount of minutes, there's X amount of sketches. How many cast members do you have, and how many cast members average per sketch? Like, there's just mathematically, the time isn't there for all these people who, like, there's nobody on the cast I don't like you don't want to see. But I think no matter what happens every week, you're going to leave an episode being, I wish I would have seen 3 or 4 people more than I did, because they just didn't, fall in that week's lineup.
And to pivot from Brad's point, it's even more competitive when we bring outsiders that are not in the cast to eat up a lot of time. So let's start with this cold open. So we had one of the longest cold opens we've seen in a long time, and one of the longest we've seen since we've been covering stats on the show. So I'm working my way back. I'm on season 42 right now. So we do have some stats on the cold opens that we have covered. And let's just take a look at those long cold opens, because it's going to really impact the screen time people are getting if the cold open is so long. So let's look at the longest ones we've seen. Number 1, Dave Chappelle monologue, season 46. No surprise there, because that was an election, post-election episode. So Joe Biden had won the election. It was called that day on Saturday, November 7th, 2020. Did a 16-minute, 19-second monologue, followed by the midterm Dave Chappelle monologue in season 48. We had the premiere of 46 debate between Jim Carrey and Baldwin as Biden and Trump. That was a 13.5-minute cold open. And then the one we saw last week, which was the Harris and Trump rallies, that was over 13 minutes as well. So a lot to cover in the news, especially in a premiere. You got to cover the whole summer. So, John, what do you think about epic cold opens and how they affect the episode? Because, we're looking at these examples, we're seeing a theme here. They're all about politics, because after that is the Kavanaugh hearing with Matt Damon, and more of that season 46 with Jim Carrey and Alec Baldwin. And we also had a sketch in season 45 with all the Democratic nominees there. We had, Bernie Sanders played by Larry David. Woody Harrelson came in as Joe Biden. We had Colin Jost as Pete. And of course, we had Kamala Harris, played by Maya Rudolph, who's now back to do that. So, of course, we get the reason why, but does it make for a better show, a worse show? Because we get to see less sketches, less pre-tapes.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer here, if I'm being completely honest. I do think that SNL often chases the high of great moments they've had in their history. So, going back to season 14 with the, George Bush Sr. and Dukakis debates, obviously the Bush, George W. Bush and Al Gore debates that were so fantastic back in season 25. I mean, those are the ones, or 24. Those are the ones that, people, think of and, wish that they could achieve those highs again. I think what's interesting here is, we have a lot of season 46 on the board. I think season 46 is a huge asterisk season where we're talking about COVID protocols being in place. So having less segments and less scenes to rehearse just made sense. And that's why you get, pretty much, almost every early episode of season 46 is listed here as a very long segment. And naturally, the Chappelle monologues is just like a unique thing unto itself. But for me, I don't know. I watched this Harris and Trump rallies cold open twice to prepare for the Hot Take Show and the Roundtable. I watched it again and talked about it in a podcast I just recorded for the patron sketch breakdown that's going to be posted exclusively on Patreon tomorrow for all of our patrons. So I've watched this cold open 3 times, and I still don't feel like it feels long. I don't know. I just watched it, and I think that the bouncing back and forth, the excitement of the people that they're bringing in, something about it made it feel not like 13 minutes at all. So I have to give them props for whatever. If they're going to do it, they did something right here, I think.
I completely agree, because we often hear criticism from our listeners and the fans of the show when we do have long cold opens, but a lot of it has to do with pacing. This was well paced. As an example, the one right ahead of it, the 13-minute, 30-second cold open to start 46, felt long to me in the time. And I remember doing the stats for it, and it was easy stats to do because it was like 2 or 3 people that were on screen the whole time. But it did feel draggy. This one didn't. So, Brad, what do you think about the cold open this week?
I did think it felt long to me. And I don't think it's really a question of is the length good or bad. I don't think the length matters if the content is good enough. And for this particular cold open, to me, it felt long because it didn't seem there wasn't a lot of meat to it. Like they were just, to me, parading out the impressions for everybody to see them. It's funny, actually. I think I was tweeting about it when I was watching it, and I think I was like 11:36 at night. My tweet was, "I wonder how many sketches get cut tonight due to pause for wait for applause," because they'd bring somebody out and there'd be like applause, 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 and they bring somebody else out, applause, applause, applause. So I don't mind a long sketch. I just think this one was a little bit long and didn't really warrant it.
I think the actual answer was 1, though. I think that the Dismukes pre-tape, The Father's Promise, was the one that was cut for time. But everything else that was intending on making it into the show made it in the show.
Wasn't there another one? What was the dragon sketch?
The dragon one was cut at dress. So that one did not make the show, or wasn't planned to make the show.
And let's talk about how it did impact the episode. As we, were mentioning, it took up 21% of the show. So right there at 13 minutes, 5 seconds, not including the opening montage, which was fantastic, by the way. Props to that montage. Was one of my favorite parts of the show, for better or worse. But it does, take out the commercial breaks, take out the good nights, all that stuff. 21% of the show was this cold open. But of course, for special reasons, coming back after a summer of crazy political news. So let's talk about one person before we get to the full screen time list that I think was impacted. And John, you talked about in the Hot Take Show that our lovely host, Gene Smart, was under the weather, and that maybe affected things. But like you just said, if only the Dismukes pre-tape was cut, which she was in, then, the decision-making of what sketches made air would not really have affected her screen time at the end of the day. So Gene Smart ended up with 12 minutes, 18 seconds. So I remember doing the stats for this. And when I got near the end to that Real Housewives sketch, which was really an ensemble piece, I was thinking she's going to have one of the lowest screen times I've ever recorded as a SNL stat guy. So it ended up being the 4th lowest screen time in all the episodes I have going back to the beginning of season 43. I'm getting it to 42 now. So of course we have some COVID episodes. 6th lowest, because this is going from highest to lowest on the screen here. We can see all the hosts that we've seen with low screen time. Of course, Tom Hanks, Kristen Wiig, SNL at Home, those will probably be unbreakable records because they weren't really in those pre-tapes. Kristen Wiig did have one. Tom Hanks did a monologue, introduced the musical guest. That was about it. Kristen Wiig
I'll give you one host that I think has less screen time than
all right,
Tom
yeah,
Hanks.
give it to me, John.
Mary Palin.
Oh yeah, she is considered a host. Hosting with her son.
Or a couple of the Rolling Stones guys from season 4. That would be my guess.
True. All right. So Tom Hanks, 4 minutes, 28 seconds is the time to beat when I get back to season 5, where the Rolling Stones hosted the premiere.
Season 4.
Season 4.
Season 4
So,
premiere. Yeah.
Season 4. Come on, Mike.
So Kristen Wiig, 5 minutes 4, and then we have a legitimate, normal episode. Simu Liu in season 47 had 11 minutes, 22 seconds. Paul Rudd in the COVID-impacted Christmas show, which had almost no cast, just Che and Keenan were there live. We had some pre-tapes that did feature cast, but Paul Rudd, 11 minutes 34. We had a Rachel Brosnahan show where she actually was not the highest screen time getter of that episode, even as a host, which is such a rarity at 12 minutes 9, and then Jean Smart at 12 minutes 18. So, John, do you think that with season 50 and the political cold open, that Jean Smart didn't really get a fair shake or didn't have the opportunity, or was that maybe by design?
I think she was sick. I think that's what happened here, which has been pretty widely reported that she was under the weather. So I think that, that impacted it. I think here it's two things, right? It's both, because the cold open of it all probably impacted the ability to put an additional segment in the show. And she was in that Dismukes pre-tape that was cut for time. So her screen time would have been higher because of that. But I also think her average screen time per segment would have been significantly higher had she not been sick, because they would have given her additional lines or things to do in sketches that she didn't end up getting in the show. So I would again look at this as, when we talk about how we're going to remember an episode of 5 or 10 years down the road, I think her, being healthy, I think she puts up maybe somewhere above Paul Rudd, perhaps. Maybe it is more than 14.4 as opposed to her getting 12.18.
So let's be clear. You think it's the sketch selection, maybe midweek if they knew she was not feeling her best, or it was editing, trimming, or assigning lines to other people that really impacted her screen time at the end of the day? I
don't know. I wish I could get that answer from one of the producers or the writers, but I really don't know. But I would guess that, she basically, the textbook sketch was the one where she did like a lot of heavy lifting, actually, and the I Love Lucy. Yeah, so it's hard to say for sure what the episode does look like if she's completely healthy. I talked about this on the roundtable a little bit. I know for a fact that on Saturday, she was really not feeling well. Like, she was walking around with the mask. She wasn't rehearsing her lines. The writers of the sketches were reading out her lines during rehearsals. So, yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the cold open and how she was feeling.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess we'll never know. But let's do a breakdown of where she did appear and for how long. So 4 minutes 7 seconds was in the monologue on screen the whole time. Shout out, we did see Will Steven, 10th year writer, at the piano there. 58 seconds was in that pyramid sketch where she did have a comedic role and was played to a lot by host Devin Walker as Strahan. 58 seconds there. Was not in the Spirit Halloween pre-tape at all. 4 minutes 2 seconds in the Scholastic, textbook writer sketch she introduced with Hannah Einbinder. Jelly Roll was not an update. 57 seconds after that, which was the what was that one? I Love Lucy. So yeah, that was shorter than I would have thought. 52 seconds after that in the Charlie XCX talk show, which that one, I think it became a little more clear that she wasn't feeling well. And didn't have a lot to say or do in that sketch either. After that, we have another musical introduction and then a minute 13 in The Real Housewives. So, Brad, was there a part of the night that you thought that Jean Smart was a good SNL host and you were happy she was there, or did it seem off to you?
I liked her the whole night. I got to be honest. When I saw your stat earlier that she had such little screen time, I was surprised because I felt like we saw her a lot, and I thought she did a good job. Like, she appeared in a lot of sketches. The book sketch and the I Love Lucy, I thought she had a lot of the heavy lifting. I honestly, I was so surprised when you said she was in it so little, because I thought I enjoyed her as a host, and I thought I saw a lot of her.
Well, also from an appearance perspective, Brad, the only other host that has appeared in less segments since those COVID episodes in 46 is Dave Chappelle. Everyone else who's been a host since the beginning of 46, besides Gene Smart and Chappelle, has appeared in at least 7 segments. Gene Smart appears in 6. So it is the numbers don't lie here.
Yeah, you're right. Well, like, and as you mentioned earlier, Mike, that cold open's long, the opening sequence is long, weekend update, and 2 musical numbers. You're already sucking so much time out of the episode right there. But I don't know. It's just weird. I liked her as a host. I thought she was in enough. I didn't miss her.
And I think she did a very good job for being sick. So I'll say that as well.
Totally.
We had a long weekend update as well. So this one was over 15 minutes. Looking at the average weekend update length, it's 12:53. This one was 15:25. So that as well. We had that Bowen segment on update as Moo Dang, the pygmy hippo, was a long update appearance. So when I did that screen time, I was like, oh, this is like almost double the length of the Devin Walker piece we saw. So let's look at everybody who was in the premiere and what their screen time was. And for old time's sake, John, you want to read the listeners what the screen time was?
I'll take it. All right,
Let's do
this. Gene Smart appeared in 12 minutes, 18 seconds, we said, and 6 segments. Maya Rudolph, 1 segment, but 9 minutes and 58 seconds of screen time, just like when she was in the cast, just, appearing in a lot of the show. Bowen Yang was the cast leader for episode 1, 9 minutes and 41 seconds of screen time. That is, I guess, 2.5 minutes greater than the next best cast member, Colin Jost, 7 minutes, 12 seconds for episode 1. Jelly Roll, who did his 2 musical performances, 6 minutes, 46 seconds. Devin Walker appeared twice in 2 impressions, 4 minutes, 54 seconds, gets a lot of time there as Eric Adams on update. Michael Che comes in next, 4 minutes, 35 seconds. Ego Wodem with 3 segments, 3:35. Andrew Dismukes, 2 segments, 2 minutes and 49 seconds. He did get to open up the show, though, for season 50, so that was exciting. Chloe Fineman was a very interesting stat that I always like to look at, who appears in a bunch of segments but does not have a lot of screen time, and that is Chloe Fineman at 5 segments, but 2:49 as well. Heidi Gardner, 2:42, only 2 segments. Keenan Thompson, only 2 segments as well. The veteran comes in with 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Andy Samberg appears on the show for the first time in a while, puts up 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Dana Carvey right behind him, 2 minutes and 12 seconds. So we get our 2 major cameos there. Marcelo Hernandez, 2 minutes, 7 seconds. JAJ with 3 segments, obviously did his jump in the cold open, a majority of his screen time, 1 minute and 57 seconds. Sarah Sherman, 1 minute, 52 seconds with 2 segments. Jim Gaffigan, another cameo, we got 1 minute, 32. Mikey Day, only 1 minute and 2 seconds of screen time. So pretty low for Mikey compared to what we're used to seeing. Ashley Padilla was the rookie of the week. I believe she actually appeared in 3 segments with 58 seconds. Michael Longfellow, 1 segment only in a pre-tape, 23 seconds, a pretty surprising number for his first year as a regular repertory player. Steve Higgins, 3 voiceovers, 13 seconds. The other 2 rookies, Jane Wickline, 1 segment, 13 seconds. Emil Joachim, 2 segments, 11 seconds. Hannah Einbinder does an introduction for 5 seconds, and Will Steven on the piano in the monologue for 5 seconds.
Thank you, John. No rust at all with that read.
Still got it.
Impressive every time. So, Brad, I'll go to you first. Is there anyone that you were surprised that you saw a lot of, surprised that you didn't see enough? We're talking about a lot of this reason we made this show and do these stats is because the eye test sometimes is completely confirmed by stats. Sometimes you're shocked by them. It seems like for Gene Smart, you were surprised that she was in it so little when you had a different impression watching it, in real life. So what do you think about these numbers first time on the SNN on BTN?
I can't follow that. John's a pro. I think Gene Smart's the only number that kind of I was surprised at. Cast wise, everything else feels like what I felt. Obviously there's a lot of Bowen, which you definitely felt and you could feel watching the show. So I go up there a bunch. Yeah, it's kind of there. Just I don't know. I'm kind of bummed just as a general seeing that Maya is number 2 at 9:58 when you have all the cast members. I love seeing cast members, so I love seeing Maya do Kamala Harris, but would have loved to seen somehow some more of the cast members get higher up that list.
And John, what about you? After doing By the Numbers finale, we talked about everything. I'm looking at the screen time per episode. Of course, Mikey Day, as I talked about at the top of the show, won the gold medal of the Power Ranking last year. He averaged 5 minutes, 49 seconds an episode last year. This week, a minute 2. So that's a surprise, especially as a Mikey Day fantasy owner yourself.
Yeah, yes, that's very true. Got him in the draft. I mean, a couple of light nights for veterans that I expect are going to have some really strong seasons. Mikey Day, like I said, I mean, only putting up 1 minute and 2 seconds of screen time with 2 segments. That's pretty surprising for week number 1, as somebody who I expect to be a big part of the season. But I do know that he's working on a lot of stuff outside of the show. So that is a storyline to watch, like we got with Keenan last year, where it's like, okay, if he has one eye on some other projects, perhaps maybe a lighter season for Mikey than expected. Heidi Gardner also, that's somebody who we all expect to dominate the show this season. 2 minutes, 42 seconds only in 2 segments. So I would expect a rebound week from Heidi, hopefully this week. But I have to talk about Bowen Yang, Mike. This was something that is the storyline of week number 1 for the cast. He was in 5 segments, clearly had a major part on Weekend Update as Mudang. The Charlie XCX talk show, huge part in that as well. Was the host of the History of the Sitcom sketch, appears in the Santa Fe sketch as well, and given the role of JD Vance in the Cold Open. So these were all like pretty major parts for Bowen. He has over 9 minutes, almost 10 minutes of screen time. So clearly the star of the show in week 1. And I think for years, we have been talking about, is this Bowen's time? The show clearly wants him to be that guy, to be the star. And I think after season 46, I remember coming on with you, Nicole, in 47 and being like, okay, this is Bowen's year. And he would have like 1 every 4 episodes or 5 episodes would be a great one for him. And now I'm starting to think like, maybe it's all going to come together for him this year, because think about it. He had such a dominant performance this past weekend. The VP debate was last night. He's probably going to be a major part of week number 2. And then Ariana Grande is hosting week number 3, his co-star in Wicked. So like he's set for an incredible start to the season. And I'm wondering if this momentum will carry through and he could be the leader of all of this at the end of season 50.
Absolutely. That was the question you had asked me on the preseason roundtable, is who do you want to buy stock into? And I said, I think it's the Bowen Yang year. I think he has the most star power and cachet of the current cast as far as name and face recognition, and people associate him with SNL and not other things like some cast members we've seen over the years, Pete Davidson and people like that. 9 minutes, 41 seconds. John did some highlights of his night. He also, right after the update piece, was anchoring that I Love Lucy as the host, the CNN host. And then he had literally anchoring the Charlie XCX talk show. So everywhere he appeared, other than the Real Housewives, where he had like a 9-second appearance there and was more of a supporter in the cold open, as opposed to James Austin Johnson and Maya Rudolph as the presidential candidates. Really huge night for Bowen. Here's some accolades for him, some stats of his night. Looking at the screen time, he hit 7 hours of career screen time at the very end of the Charlie XCX sketch. So if you look at every second that Bowen Yang has been on our favorite show, got to 7 hours total at the end of that sketch. This is his 5th highest screen time of his career. His highest ever was last year in the Jason Momoa episode, season 49, episode 5. And this week is the 7th time in his career that he's led the cast. Brad, I'll go to you as someone who looks at episodes, featuring Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, and John Belushi. Is Bowen Yang, we're not putting him on a Mount Rushmore tonight. We're not doing that, not that type of show. But is Bowen Yang the leading performer of this cast to you?
I think so. I think he is. He's had a great run. I've liked watching him start out, and I think he took a nice gradual build to this point. I think everything you guys said, I think this is his season. I think everything's led up to this. John learning about 2 and 3 makes total sense the next couple of weeks. And I like seeing it. I liked seeing him be that guy this week, being the leader.
some milestones to look out for. Heidi Gardner could hit 10 hours of career screen time next week, about 4-ish minutes away from that. So hopefully we see some Heidi. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Heidi and Chloe moderating that debate that we saw last night between the vice presidential candidates. So we could see Heidi get some screen time early on next week. James Austin Johnson, 4 appearances away from 200. So we could see that milestone coming up next week. And I didn't hear him talked about at all on the roundtable on Monday night, but Devin Walker, 6th highest screen time for him. So he had, for the recently upgraded to repertory players, Devin Walker beating out Marcelo and Longfellow. Speaking of Longfellow, 12th episode he's had with less than a minute. So we were on a big Michael Longfellow danger watch last year. Not a great start for him. We did not see him live on stage. John?
Yeah, I almost don't know what to say with Michael Longfellow, because I'm just hoping that this does turn around and he finds his niche. Obviously, he's been, upgraded to repertory status. So for me, there's an opportunity here. So hopefully we'll table that conversation for a later date. Devin Walker voted 3rd in our MVP poll that we put out, that we did talk about at the end of the roundtable. But really impressive night for him. So happy to have him as a major part of the show. I do want to talk about Chloe for a second, guys, if that's okay. Because, I mentioned this, sort of stat that I always look for that we talk about, which is like the average screen time per segment. And she gets that, very interesting stat line this week, Brad, of 2 minutes and 49 seconds in 5 different segments. So we're going to see her spread out throughout the show, but for very little. And my argument with Chloe is that I always felt, as talented of a performer as she is, she's not like a Bowen or a Heidi or an Ego. Like, I think she is best suited to put up this stat line that we got from her this week. Give me little pieces of impressions and bit rolls in sketches, and she could really help move a sketch forward of somebody else's voice. But I think once we start having Chloe's voice take over the show, I don't know that it works as well. So for me, I think that as complimentary as I am of Bowen for being the star of episode 1, I have to compliment Chloe for finding her role on the show that best serves her. What are your thoughts on that, Brad?
That's a great point. I agree. And especially when your cast is this big, you have to find your role. And I think you're exactly right. That is a great role for her. Pop in, do a quick little impression, pop out, because she doesn't do anything bad. Every time you see her, it's small, but it's good. So I think you hit the nail right on the head with her. And it's funny. It's good to see it in the stats. I think Devin Walker's the one to watch. I thought watching the episode, they set him up really well with the Eric Adams and the Michael Strahan impression. And now seeing how high he was actual numbers wise in the stats, I think he's going to be the one to watch this season stat wise. But as far as Chloe goes, I think exactly right, John.
Did
Does she remind you of Lorraine at all, Brad? No.
I'm only pausing because I think she's better than Lorraine, if that makes sense. Like,
interesting. Okay.
I think she does this, or she's getting the opportunity to do it better, because Lorraine, I think you'd actually see less, go figure, with a smaller cast than you would, say, a Chloe. And I think Chloe takes more advantage of the time she gets than Lorraine did.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I always felt like Chloe's comp to me was like an Abby Elliott type, but as I see her come into this role, I think about other generations of the show that really needed somebody like Chloe to throw in a good impression or just help somebody's sketch carry along. And I see her value a lot more. And that was something that I feel like Lorraine eventually developed into. Like, took a long time for her to find her spot on the show. But I think throughout the original era, Lorraine eventually was great at helping move forward other people's sketches. So that's where the connection sort of came there for me. And I was curious if you saw that at all, but interesting thought.
Definitely the connection of, like, yes, bring somebody to help pull your sketch along as a complimentary player. I agree with you. I think Chloe does it a little better.
John, while we were having that great comp conversation, I was in the lab crunching some Chloe Fineman stats. So looking at the peaks and valleys. So literally averages exactly 1 minute per appearance. So she just hit over 5 hours total screen time. So I had just mentioned that Bowen Yang hit just 7 hours, and they're in the same class, the class of 45. Bowen Yang, I will say did get a couple of appearances as a writer before that, but nothing too significant to give him that big of an edge over his classmate Chloe Fineman. So her biggest appearance or longest screen time, John, is big favorite of this podcast. What's in the Kiln from Emma Stone. She had 5 minutes, 8 seconds of screen time. And that is the longest we've ever seen Chloe Fineman on SNL. After you drop from there, it's a 4-minute appearance when she did a Mikey two-handed update appearance back in season 48. Dog acting school commercial. Of course, the 2 Britney Spears cold opens. And we had Karaoke All-Stars from, I think that's the Jonathan Majors show, season 47. So not a lot of like huge hit characters, probably just the Britney cold opens because they kicked off the show. But if I scroll down to the low end of the Chloe Fineman, there's a lot of like 2-3 second voice work appearances. And then there's just like a ton of bit rolls. So it's definitely a tale of two cities with Chloe and Bowen, because their stats for starting at the same season are like night and day. So I'm glad we talked about her.
Yeah, and my thesis for this cast for the last couple of years has been it is the most ensemble that SNL has ever been. There's just a lot of people who could be a star on any given night, and you don't look at anybody as necessarily the lead of the cast. So coming into this, season, I was wondering if that would change at all. And all I could tell you from one episode of data is that Bowen is on pace to become that person. And the other people who you would typically see run a night at SNL in Heidi or Mikey or Judge or Ego, all of them, didn't necessarily have amazing stat lines in week 1. So far it is looking like season 50 is Bowen's show. It's very early, but it is a fascinating stat to take a look at after week number 1 and imagine where we could be in a few months from now.
Just to close the loop on the Bowen v. Chloe thing, Chloe Fineman has more appearances than Bowen. So it tells you right there that they're for less time. And Bowen's average career screen time per appearance, 1:26. So 26 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but on SNL it is. So we look at all those big Bowen appearances. He has less appearances than Chloe, but almost an entire 2 hours more of screen time. So let's talk about people we've never seen on Saturday Night Live, because I love doing this every year on By the Numbers because we've had new hires every season we've done this podcast. So this week we got 3 new ones, and I thought as season 50, we're doing a lot of history. Let's talk about everybody who's ever, not ever, because it wouldn't fit in the screen. So I went back to Kate McKinnon. So this is in season 37. Kate McKinnon came in mid-season that year. And I looked at everyone's debut the first time that, a Don Pardo or a Daryl Hammond introduced them into the cast. So I don't count, like I mentioned, Bowen Yang before he was a cast member, or Leslie Jones, people like that who were in the writer's room before cast member. So we want to look at this chart right here. And it's really fascinating because you're going to see some names that you're like, they did not turn out, or names that are at the bottom of the list that became huge stars. So I'm going to read off a couple of the top and then let Brad and John look at all these numbers and see if they, find some gold here. But James Austin Johnson, no surprise at all, had a monster rookie debut. Season 47 opened the show as the incumbent president. He played Joe Biden, and that was the first time we ever got to see him on the show. It was front and center right away. And then after that, he had a great night as well. 10 minutes, 15 seconds. So that's over 2 minutes ahead of number 2, which is Michael Che. So you can take it with a grain of salt that he was just on update. He had 8 minutes, 5 seconds. Mikey Day had a great debut in season 42. He's someone that the writer's room was familiar with because that's where he came from. Mike O'Brien, who's a one-season cast member, also from the writer's room. 5 minutes, 24 seconds in his debut. Kyle Mooney in season 39 came in with that big rookie class. If you remember, they came out with Tina Fey dancing in her monologue. It was so much fun to go back and do season 39 and get that screen time for Brooks Wheelan, Noel Wells, John Milheiser, Mike O'Brien, Beck Bennett, and Kyle Mooney. So Kyle Mooney you would not have guessed won the night that night and ended up being the longest tenured because he stayed a year longer than Beck Bennett. And then Kate McKinnon, who just 1 second under 5 minutes. Sasir Zameda in season 39, 4:55. And then Sarah Sherman, who led a 10-1 sketch alongside Dismukes in the Owen Wilson hosted season 47 premiere. So, John, this feels like your kind of stat right here. What do you think about rookie debuts? Do they mean nothing at all? And if they don't, what's fun about this chart?
Oh, I love it so much. This is so good. And James Austin Johnson, again, with his premiere in 47 was like momentous. I mean, that stat there is fascinating to see that he's, in the last 13 years, like the number one by over 2 minutes is crazy for his first episode. So just like what an incredible debut. Yeah, I mean, look, I think what's fascinating here is where we have our 3 rookies from this season in Ashley Padilla, Jane Wickline, and Emil Akim. I mean, I think that everyone, collectively felt like Ashley was the one who showed the most in episode 1 with 58 seconds. That is, a lot less than a lot of the counterparts we have on screen here. But still, in those 58 seconds, I felt like she was emoting a lot. She was like really felt like comfortable with what we saw. And again, she was the rookie that was in, I think Emil may have also appeared in that cut for time pre-tape that we didn't get. So we would have gotten even more of them a little bit to get to see Ashley on screen. And just coming from the groundlings, having that familiarity with sketch comedy, I really feel like she's set for a pretty good rookie season. So it's interesting to see her pretty close to Chloe Trost, who was at 1 minute and 10 seconds last season, who seemed to fit right in. Obviously, that was not a success story, unfortunately, but I do feel pretty good about what we got from Ashley. I think Emil and Jane are still pretty big question marks just through one episode.
Brad, looking back at the early days, was there somebody that I'm sure you've tried to do this even as the expert that you are? You're probably thinking about, what if I was watching this right now live in 1975? Would I have known that John Belushi would become this guy? That type of thing. So looking at these 3 rookies that we saw this week and anyone else on the chart, what do you think about what it means to, debut on SNL? Do you take any stake into it?
I think nowadays with the cast being so big, I don't think there's as much stake in it. Again, there's just so many mouths to feed. And if you're the new person on the block, it's going to be so much harder to try to get that time. But looking at a couple seasons earlier, the name that surprises me the most on this whole list is that A.D. Bryant is so low. Somebody who had such a great run. And I'd be surprised if you were to ask me this without just without seeing the numbers. A.D. Bryant's in like the last 5 or 6 names. You'd say I'm shocked. That one, that's the biggest shock, I think.
Yeah, Brad's talking about 15-second debut from A.D. Bryant in season 38. She came in with Cecily Strong. So Cecily, Tim Robinson, and A.D., they came, that half season after Kate, kind of considered like the same class, but Kate did have a leg up coming in as not a rookie in that year. So 15 seconds for A.D. Bryant, 15 for Marcello, who I think people would say is really the leader of his class. Andrew Dismukes also entering in a very similar circumstance alongside Punky Johnson and Lauren Holt in 46, as we talked about those long cold opens. So we didn't really get to see those 3 rookies for a bit. But the very bottom of the list, as John pointed out, Jane Wickline, 13 seconds, Emil Joachim, 11 seconds, and then Luke Null with a 00 for his debut in season 43. So I'm showing you on the screen right now. If you want to watch along on YouTube, if you're an audio listener, I did include Keenan. I could only fit 40 on the screen, but had to throw Keenan in there. Shout out to Ellis, putting Keenan's debut over a 5-minute debut. So no surprise there, as we know Keenan now. But the bottom of the list, 2 rookies from this week and Luke Null. So not the company you want to be in. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of people in the middle that you would say average night. Who knows? But these are very low debuts. John?
Yeah. When I look at this chart, what I take away mostly is that I think the top of the chart means more than the bottom. So I think people at the bottom, Chloe, Devin, Molly, A.D., Marcello, Dismukes, Jane, Emil, like I don't know that it means much that somebody doesn't get screen time in their opening episode, because I think that a rookie can take the first, half of the season to sort of get their sea legs under them and hope that they get like 1 or 2 good episodes. But I do think that the top of the chart is a good indicator. So if you have somebody that is, putting up in their first episode, at least 2 minutes of screen time, I think that's an indicator of a potential successful SNL career. Obviously, there are exceptions on this list, like a couple of the season 39 rookies. And, Mike O'Brien ended up going back to the writer's room. Noel Wells, Brooks Wheelan, and John Milheiser were not all asked back. Rudnitsky and Tim Robinson are the others on this list, near the top that didn't end up coming back. But I would think that, I sort of look here at like that 2-minute threshold of a first episode that people want. If you're given that, the producers want to give you a shot on the show. So I think you have more leash potentially by having those extra couple minutes in the first episode.
It just shows why this show is so fun to do stats on, because we got to see a premiere, season 50. We're all so jazzed for it to come back. And in the meantime, we're like, oh, there's 3 rookies that I want to see. Are they going to be there? Are they going to make a splash on night 1 when Maya Rudolph, Dana Carvey, Andy Samberg's here tonight? And are we going to see Jelly Roll in a sketch? What's Gene Smart going to do? So we see these 3 rookies. They're all log under a minute. But there have been seasons past where people have debuted on Weekend Update their first night. So that's Cecily Strong, Pete Davidson, Kyle Mooney, as I mentioned. So sometimes night 1, of the season, the first episode you're in, you get to be, sliding into, next to Seth Meyers or Jostin Che and introduce yourself to America. So we saw that and Canada. So we saw that with Aristotle and Sarah a couple episodes in, and sometimes we wait and we get excited for that. Michael Longfellow, we saw his first night, followed by Marcelo and then Devin Walker. They kind of did them one by one, and we had to wait to the very end of the year for Molly. But we all got there with those rookies, and I'm bummed we never did with Chloe Trost. So getting that early breakout, I think, is a lot more important than your first night. But this is the data we have for these 3 newbies. So love doing these kind of stats, and I hope to get all the way back to Chevy. So we can maybe do that next year and have just slide after slide.
Brad, how much screen time do you think Chevy got in episode 1?
Oh, Jesus, episode 1.
Yeah, probably not a lot, actually, because I feel like none of the cast members did.
There was so much going on that episode. Yeah, probably not. But by episode 3, yeah, he's high up there.
Yeah, I'd say episode 4, the Candice Bergen one, I think, is the one where he does forward for the first time. So that's probably the one that he has that breakout moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike, I can't wait to see these stats one day.
I can't wait either. I mean, hopefully it's while I'm still breathing, so we can do them all. Okay. And then, by the way, somebody like Eddie Murphy, kind of made their debut before their debut. He came on SNL and the next week was in the cast, so that can happen too. It's weird circumstances, but it does happen. Leslie Jones was a mid-season pickup, and she was already on an update before was part of the cast, so you can kind of get that intro before your debut, so to speak. So we'll look at Keenan and Finesse Mitchell coming in together, and imagine if Finesse Mitchell was in his 22nd year at SNL. You never do know. So pretty crazy stuff. Alternate timeline. Finesse Mitchell is the goat of SNL from that class. Okay, so in the spirit of season 50, and especially when I got Brad on tonight, and as I always open the year up with John, 2 real critical thinkers of SNL, and I just love to celebrate the show. I really geeked out about it at the round table about coming in and just acknowledging the history. That's what we want to see, because if you're a casual and you watch the cold open on YouTube and talk about the politics, that's great for you. I'm happy that you're watching the show. But if you're like us and like every detail, you love the references. So I figured that this year I would do a question segment, and to kick off each question, I would play a classic SNL clip. So just a quick hit. It's going to be a SNL band hit, a clip, and then I'm going to ask a question. John, you want to go first?
Sure. Go for it.
Have to open with this one. Okay.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
Question 1. Dana Carvey did an impression of Joe Biden this week, his 60th impression in SNL history. Give me your top 3 favorite Dana impressions.
Okay, I think I gotta go. I mean, I don't want to go chalk here, but I think you can't not choose H.W. Bush. I think that's that is Brad's dying. I mean, coming right off the ignorant slut. I'd say
it wouldn't be prudent.
I'm glad you took it.
Yeah. I'd say George Bush Sr. I think honestly developed into a fantastic SNL impression. So gotta go there. You said 3, right?
3, top 3.
Yeah, I probably would go. I'm gonna go McLaughlin from the McLaughlin group that he did. I think that one was a really good one. And then for the third, I mean, he does so many good impressions. Give me his. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. Give me his George Michael impression he did on Update.
Did not see that one coming.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of good ones in the chat too. Jimmy Stewart, Casey Kasem. There's some good ones. Yeah, I'll throw out George Michael, John McLaughlin, and even though that was more of a character, and H.W. Bush.
Brad, over to you. Top 3 Dana impressions.
I'm glad John took George Bush because I purposely didn't put him on my list. It is a great impression though. But I went with Ross Perot. No, I went through them. Ross Perot. I loved when he did that, and I thought it was a fun take. Number 2, I love when he did Dennis Miller to Dennis Miller. I love his Dennis Miller impression. It was really great. And the third one I love too, another entertainment one is Johnny Carson, including Carsenio. But his just Johnny Carson was so good. Those would be my 3.
I think you won this one. I was not. You these are so good. He has so many good ones. That's tough.
That's the problem. I was trying to take the ones that maybe like aren't the obvious ones. So I was like,
yeah,
I don't know. And I was watching back in the day. Like that was my sweet spot when he was doing Perot. So I mean, I just also have a soft spot for that one.
Love the Jimmy Stewart. Love the Casey Kasem. But yeah, love the Ross Perot. So that's I'm glad someone shouted that one out. All right.
This is how you answer a door in my neighborhood.
Question 2. After the dismissal of Chloe Trost, after just one season, I want to ask you, Brad, in SNL history, who was the biggest one that got away?
Is this you mean like the person you were saddest to see leave, like you wish they would have stayed on?
Just, I would say someone in general who did not have a long tenure, whether it be 1 or 2 seasons, or if they were on for a bit, they didn't get a lot on the air, that was just never used by SNL, who you think either did have a great career after and they missed out on that talent, or we just never got enough of them to know about it.
The person I have, when I went back and looked, I was surprised to see they were on the show as much as they were, because I was like, oh, they were only on for like 2 seasons and 3 seasons, didn't use them. Melissa Villaseñor. I thought she was great. I loved her on the show. And I remember, maybe it's because I think the last 2 seasons she was never on. He probably had the stats for that. But I remember like always watching the show being like, where is she? Why isn't she on? And so I think she would be the one that I wish would have been on, or wish would have been better, or wish we could have seen more of.
Interesting call. She did have 6 seasons on SNL.
I know. I saw that today when I
debut on that chart.
I looked it up. I was like, she was on for 6. I was like, oof. I think I thought my answer might be wrong then.
John, over to you. The one that got away.
George Coe. No, I'm gonna say Jenny Slate is the one that got away. I know she had an F-bomb in her first episode, and that was basically defined her SNL career. But I mean, she was so good in Parks and Rec. Like, she has so many great projects. Like, to me, I think she could have been a really good SNL cast member for a very long time. Obviously, there's like the big names like Tim Robinson and Robert Downey Jr. and stuff like that had the potential. But yeah, I'll go with Jenny Slate for fun.
I'm gonna go Ben Stiller.
He used to be a caveman, but now he's a lawyer.
Don't play the whole thing, Mike.
Unfrozen caveman lawyer.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to get flagged.
Question 3. Who is your dream cameo for season 50 if you could pick just one? And they have to be alive, John. Who do you think? If you could just pick one just for Jon Schneider.
Is it like a former cast member? Or it could be like anybody.
Could be anyone alive right now.
Can you go to Brad first? Sorry.
All right, Brad. Dream cameo. Full disclosure to listeners, I sent these questions at like 9 a.m. So they got to think about it. This isn't.
No,
I
did think about it actually, and I don't think the show. I don't know, hot take or not. I don't think the show does cameos that well anymore. I don't really like cameos on the show anymore because they do them so much. I feel they haven't done them good in like a decade since the What's Up With That sketch when like it was like, who's going to sit next to Lindsey Buckingham? So I had a hard time figuring, like so many people do it. I came up with an outside the box answer of Rick Moranis. Next week is the 35th anniversary of his second hosting stint, which is one of the best monologues of all time. So I don't know. I'm throwing Rick Moranis out there.
John?
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I mean, again, like I'm not the type of SNL watcher that like really hopes for a specific cameo. Like, so for me, I just like, I know what I like on the show, and is like Justin Timberlake a cop-out?
Hey, you can answer however you like. I just figured.
No, the real answer is I saw somebody in the chat, and I gotta just credit John and Annius, always in the chat, just with great comments. And Jane Curtin being at the show would be fantastic at any moment. So that would be awesome.
So I actually wrote Jane. I actually wrote Jane as my first answer, but then I don't know what she would do. I don't know if she'd do a sketch very well other than doing update. And I think it might be underwhelming if she came on, but I did actually write Jane as my first answer. And I was like, no, I don't know if it works.
Were you actually, this is a good transition point, Mike. Sorry, I was going to say, Brad, were you disappointed that we didn't get Lorraine on since we got her daughter this weekend?
I was, especially because she was, Lorraine was in the news a little bit complaining about the bear, and the bear being, mentioned a comedy. I thought they would kind of do something like that to get her in like with a sketch or something. So I was kind of bummed when I saw the intro and she was out there to intro, and I was like, oh, I don't think we're going to see her now.
For me, it's got to be Garrett, oldest living cast member, original cast, Garrett Morris.
Governor Bush, strategery.
Question 4. What recurring sketch or character would you not be excited to see in season 50? John, I'm going to go to you first again since you punted last time.
Yeah, sure. I think I have a different take than I did the last couple of years. I think everyone was pretty out on Lisa from Temecula. I think now that the writers of Lisa from Temecula have left the show, Gary and Alex English, I think I would say, let's table, ironically, that sketch.
Cut my meat. Over to you, Brad.
Jon Schneider, master of the puns. Well played. I don't know why it jumped out. I put the Roxbury guys. I don't need to see them again.
I don't think that's going to happen. This is 0% chance we would see them again, but it is a funny pull.
I don't.
Della televisione conmio, Vini
Now that is
Question
a sketch
5. Same. Also Vincent Price. What is something that modern day SNL could learn and possibly adopt from the original era of the show? Brad, who better to ask than you?
Oh, thanks. I have 2 things. One, that they could be more outside the box and less formulaic. I think everybody knows the beats of every episode of SNL anymore. You know what sketch is coming, when it's a pre-tape, when it's the musical guest. I'd love for them just do something completely different, whether it's a Charles Grodin host takeover kind of an idea, or just something unexpected that you're not ready for. And along those lines, one of the things I miss the most, especially about watching some of the old season, is all the meta-ness of it, all the behind the scenes, seeing the cast backstage as themselves, kind of that fictitious world of the inner workings of SNL. Those are the 2 things I love the most about the early season, and I miss the most watching current day.
Love that take. Jon Schneider.
Be still my heart, Brad. You said it so perfectly. I really can't add much to that. The meta nature of the show in the original years helped make me fall in love with it even more. I love that, we really got to know the dynamics between the cast members through what we saw on screen. Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I do think, had we not necessarily opened up because we had all the politics that we had to get to, but at some point of, the first episode of the show, we went backstage and we saw some sort of interaction with Ashley, Emil, and Jane talking to some of the cast members, and they did it as part of a bit. I think we would, be on here all week talking about like how great that segment was, how cool it was to get to know them. So I just would like them to also take some more chances.
Yeah, both great answers. I would be along the same lines. I would say that I know it's a different era because I was not alive in the 1970s, but when I watch those old shows, it does feel like it's this mystical New York City world back there that anything's possible. And they've always relied on pop culture. That's nothing new, but it seems like they're almost too reliant on it, and they want to go a little bit lowest common denominator or a lot of it because it's about more of the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like back in the day, it was just so much of it feels almost scary and feels risky and that kind of thing. Brad, would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I 100%. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I'm just sitting here thinking, like, how great of a cold open would it be if those three rookies are sitting around and they're in the old locker room set or whatever, but they're talking about they're talking stats, and they're like, I can't believe I was only on for a minute, and they're like, complaining and commiserating to each other, and then you get an all-star cameo like Jane Curtin or Garrett Morris walk in, and they like give them a pep talk, and then they're like live from New York. It's like the best open you can think of right now, I feel like.
I love that. I had a similar thought because when I was writing the questions this morning, I was thinking about maybe I'll ask John because he's the keeper of the LFNYs for the folks at home. That's live from New York's. So right now we're in a tie between Daryl Hammond and Kate McKinnon. And I was going to ask, do you think that we will have, the victor at the end of season 50? And I thought, how great would it be having a cold open with the two of them just on stage together talking about that? I know it's a pipe dream as a stat guy of the SNN, but for some reason, like maybe Kate is trying to say it first and Daryl's stopping her. Daryl's trying to get the record. Like something about that in season 50, I think would play. I know it's extremely niche for this audience whom I love, and we talk about this shit, but like something about that, acknowledging that, hey, we've had 969 episodes and then we're going to go further, that's the type of thing that's important to the show. Like deconstructing live from New York, it's Saturday night, which happened in the first episode with Chevy Chase, October 11th, 1975. And you have Kate and Daryl fighting over who gets to be number one. I mean, Daryl was number one for a long time before Kate tied him last year, but something like that, John, would that tickle you?
Of course, for sure. I mean, I could definitely see them doing something to that effect at the 50th in February. Not necessarily like the Daryl Kate live from New York thing, but including some sort of records at the show and all that stuff. I mean, that's like perfect fodder for hosts coming out and say, I'm the one who did this the most times, I'm the one that did this the most times. So yeah, I mean, if they incorporated that into the regular show, it would be very exciting. I think these are things that if I was producing the show, I would start to think about after the election, because I think the election is a major focus of this first part of the season. But I think once we get into what hopefully is a very simple result, then we can, sort of talk about just celebrating SNL in its 50th year and what we can do to sort of, party and remember the history of the show.
No doubt. Election comes first, and there's like 35 days to go. So hopefully it goes by quickly and we got some good SNL in the meantime. But anyway, that was 5 questions for season 50. Hope you enjoyed it. So we're going to wrap up the show with looking at the current state of SNL season 50 power rankings. John did a lovely job with the redesign today. So here we have it. So if you're new to the podcast and don't know what the heck this is, the power ranking is what I mentioned at the top of the show, so you could see what it looked like after a full year. because this stat is based on an average. So we take average week after week after week to see who's rising to the top, who's falling, who's competing. Last year, we had a really close 3-way race with Bowen, Mikey, and Heidi to reach number 1 up until the last episode, the Jake Gyllenhaal show. So it kind of ebbs and flows like that. So, John, tell them the results, and then I'm going to explain how these numbers all work.
Absolutely. So we just have one number this time to get our average power ranking for season 50, and I'll go through all 17 cast members from week number 1. So Bowen Yang, dominant week at 139.8. Colin Jost is number 2 in the rankings at 92.3. Devin Walker at an 81.7. Chloe Fineman puts up a 69. Michael Che puts up 64.6. Ego Wodum 53.7. JAJ at 46.5, Keenan at 44.3, Marcelo 39.8, and Dismukes 39.3. That is your top 10. On from there, Heidi Gardner, only a 38.3, but just for week number 1. Ashley Padilla, rookie of the week at 35.3. Then we get down to Sarah Sherman, 29.4, a pretty low number for Mikey Day, who was pretty close to the top every single week last year at 29.3. And we bottom out a little bit here with Michael Longfellow, 13.2, then Emil Joachim, 11.1, and Jane Wickline, 6.9 in the power rankings. So, Mike, how do these numbers work?
All right, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to pull back the Jane curtain right now, and we're going to go into the lab and look at how the algorithm works. I know people are going to say I was told there would be no math, but we're going to look at the actual process. Just because, we've been doing the show for 5 years, by the numbers, we talk about the power rankings. I hold them sacred. Let's talk about how they actually work. I'll make it as brief as possible. So here's what I do. I watch the show. I watch every sketch. I count the appearances and I count the screen time. I add them all together. But it goes deeper than that. The reason I invented the stat was because I was doing appearance counting. I started doing screen time, and I thought, both of these stats are really exciting. I love discussing them, but they can be kind of bullshit at the end of the day, because every week it's like Colin Jost again or Michael Che because weekend update, or the Chloe Finemans get no love because she appears a lot but not a lot of screen time. So I figured out, how do I combine those into one number? So here's what I do. I categorize the appearances as an A, a B, a C, or a D. An A would be the lead role in a sketch. That's Maya Rudolph, James Austin Johnson in the cold open. That's, of course, the host during the monologue. It's the weekend update correspondence. It sounds difficult, but if you watch a sketch, you can do it at home. I encourage you to. It's pretty easy to kind of identify who's quarterbacking a sketch, who's helping it facilitate along. That would be a B, a supporting role. So you have some couples on a date at a table. One person could be the one who's driving the story. Everyone else is there to play off of. So I kind of consider everybody to be a B until they're upgraded to an A or downgraded to a C. A C role would be somebody who has a non-speaking appearance or is just one tiny bit part. So think about our rookies in Emil and Jane in the Spirit Halloween pre-tape. They did not speak, but they were seen. They did play a small character in the sketch. They had some, purpose to be there, but they did not drive the sketch. They were not even a supporting. They were just really kind of there. Sometimes people were literally in the background for a debate sketch, not a debate sketch, but like a lot of the political ones, they'll be in the background. They're racking up screen time, but does it really mean anything? That's what we're talking about here. And a D would be a non-appearance appearance, which is a voiceover or a still. That means they made some contribution, but they weren't actually there. So that's a D. Here we go. Break down how they work. An A roll gets 3 points. A B roll gets 2. A C roll gets 1. And a D roll gets 0.5. That's going to be important later. Let's look at screen time now. So I total up the segments of SNL. This week, I have it on the screen here. We have a 63-minute and 2-second episode of the show. I take out the musical performances because that's usually dedicated to the musical guest, and there's not really a lot of chance for a cast member or a cameo to appear. It's really just the host introing the musical guest. So I will take that out so it doesn't dilute the number. I want to keep it as fair as possible. So I totaled those segments of the show, cold open, monologue, sketches, pre-tapes, weekend update, became 56 minutes, 12 seconds. Everybody who appeared that night gets a total score. For how long they were on screen, they get a percentage of that total of 56 minutes, 12 seconds. So Bowen won the night. So I'm going to break down how Bowen got the top power ranking. He appeared for 9 minutes and 41 seconds in that show. That's 17.23% of SNL. Bowen Yang was on your television. I also look at primetime, people who appear the top of the show, cold opens, monologues, all up to weekend update. Weigh that a little heavier. Doesn't make a huge difference, but I add their percentage of primetime twice, their total percentage, get an average of those three numbers. And that equals their screen time score right here. So Bowen Yang got a 16.04 screen time score. If you're still with me, God bless. All right. So appearances, I total up all those roles, A's, B's, C's, and D's. This was a pretty light night, only 58 credited appearances in the night. So if you had multiple lead roles like Bowen Yang did, he had 3 leads. He had 2 supporting. He gets, remember, 3 times 3 for A's and 2 times 2 for the B roles. He ended up with 5 total appearances and gets a net score of 13 and gets a percentage of the entire everyone's scores for appearances. That gets a percentage. That will be his appearance score, 10.57. I love how John's laughing because I've never explained this entire process on a podcast before, and I'm really nervous about it. Okay, so I averaged together the 10.57 appearance score for Bowen Yang and the 16.04 screen time score. He got a 133.03 power ranking. It's one more little thing that we did just for fun, because as fans of the show, we know that there's a lot that can happen and a lot that gives you more weight as a cast member. 2 things, or really 3 things. One is saying those magic words live from New York. It's Saturday night. If you say that in a given show, you get a 0.5 bonus into your appearance score. It does not affect the total, so it doesn't hurt anybody else. It only just helps that individual. Also, if you appear as a recurring character or as yourself, you get that bump too. So Maya Rudolph, you'll see on her score, she got 1.0 bonus because she had recurred as Kamala Harris and said live from New York. So instead of getting a what she would have got without that, when she had a 2.4 appearance score because she appeared once and he averaged that all together, she bumped her up to a 3.25. So she got more points for that. So after all that, Bowen Yang, for his 9 minutes and 41 seconds, averaged in to the percentage of the total, weighted average for prime time, appearing 3 times as a lead, 2 times as a supporting character, no bonus because he didn't say live from New York, didn't have a recurring character, but this week he probably will because it'll be JD Vance. That'll be a recurring character. Average together, he got a 133, which is a really damn high score. Only a few people have had 100 last year. So Bowen crushed it. He had 4 episodes over 100 before this. So this is one of his best episodes in his career. John, how did I do explaining that math?
It was my understanding there would be no math.
There it is.
You did great. I mean, that's awesome. While I'm talking, if you want to just check, I'm curious if the 133, is that the highest career for Bowen's power ranking ever?
It is not. I think it was his second or third best.
Okay. Well, I thought this would be a hilarious idea to have Mike go out there and be like, okay, we put these numbers out to you every single week. So can you just clearly explain to people how you got this number? But that was just incredibly impressive. You always amaze me. So you know that Mike's the real deal here. And this is an awesome way to evaluate cast members on a week-to-week basis.
Mike,
Brad, how we doing?
That is astounding. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I don't even. I can't even.
It was great. It was great.
I'm not smart enough to comprehend how you all figured that out.
And ultimately, the too long didn't read of that explanation is, how do we measure the impact that an individual had on a given night?
And could you just put up the power rankings one more time from this week, just to make sure that for anybody now that they do understand how it works, can see the totals?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. So we got it up on screen now. Yeah, so this looks good. I mean, like you said, the TLDR is how do you measure impact, and I think this is a really good way to do it. Clearly, Bowen had the most impactful week one, so that is our storyline, and I'm very curious to see how this will work as we start adding in other episodes and averaging it out throughout the season to see who really is the star of season 50 of Saturday Night Live.
It's going to be a fun time, but that's just the way we do it because, like I said, the numbers are misleading, and I want it to be as objective as humanly possible, going back consistently. Because, as we talked about, Brad mentioned, John mentioned, looking at season one with a cast of really just 7 people versus 17, you might say, well, wouldn't the original cast just always crush the current cast? That's why it's based on percentage, because the amount of available roles in a given night is pretty consistent across the board, as in, you can have a night with, like, remember the Will Forte episode? Not a lot of appearances. So if you got to be in that show more, that's going to carry more weight than when everyone's appearing all the time. So that's kind of how it works. So I can't wait to see where it goes next. And will it be Bowen's year? Maybe he'll never leave number 1 spot. So, and looking forward, just this very second, we got the read-through picks of Nate Bargatze, who's coming back to host the show this Saturday. Musical guest Coldplay. Brad, what did you think of Nate Bargatze's first go around at 8H last October?
I love that episode. That was really good. And I mean, no surprise that George Washington's sketch is, I think, one of the best they've done in years. I think that was a fantastic sketch. I love it.
John, seeing Nate Bargatze come back this quickly, we talked about it at the preseason. Pretty rare these days. First timer. A lot of SNL fans might not have been familiar with him. And the only reason he's back is not because he's starring in a huge Hollywood blockbuster or has been in some scandalous news. He is back because his show is really good. So does that restore your faith, or faith give you more that SNL is rewarding Nate with a second go around?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Nate Bargatze. I know his promo came out earlier today as well, and he looked great. And it was a really fun piece that Tim Wilkemy put together. I saw that his daughter was in that too, so that was really like a really cute promo that they did. And had all the newbies in it. I think Nate is the type of person that really embraces the show. He did. Nate has a podcast, and he did one after he hosted SNL last season. And he talked about just being there and like realizing all these things about the show that he never realized before and how cool the process was. And I just think that like he's known as being like the nice guy comedian, but I think in general, beyond his stand-up comedy, he's just like a really, really flexible, like good person that everyone's excited to have in the building. And he's like very witty and really dry in a way that like is appealing. So I think like the type of comedy that he brings to the show is a little bit different from some others. And I'm excited for what we're going to get from him. I don't think they're going to try and hopefully they're not going to try and reprise anything from last season, because I just think that Nate has the ability to make anything funny. So I'm very excited for what we'll get. And this could be, again, the beginning of a big run of getting to see Nate for many seasons on the show.
Last time he was with us, logged 9 minutes, 19-second monologue, one of the longest we've seen in a while. That could be, they might make him truncate that with a long cold open. But he did have 21 minutes, 26 seconds of screen time. So, John, over under this week?
Over under 21 minutes?
26 last time.
I'm going to take the under just because of the cold open. I think that's going to, even though I don't want the VP debate to eat up as much of the show as the first week, and I think it will probably be a little bit shorter than week number 1, but I think given the time there, I think he'll be a little bit less. He's still going to get the stand-up monologue, so I think that he's going to have a pretty decent monologue. But yeah, I'll call it somewhere like 19 minutes.
All right, that would be on the lower side overall, but he did as a stand-up, they always have a longer monologue generally. So we've seen it not Chappelle monologue duration, but in general with a Mulaney, other stand-ups we've seen, Amy Schumer. So we'll see what happens. Pete Davidson last year. So, Brad, do you think SNL can resist the urge, the sweet nectar of a viral sequel? Can they resist it, or will we get some fresh stuff only? Last question of the night.
Oh, for next week?
Yeah, for next week. Can they resist temptation to sequelize the biggest sketch of last year, other than like Beavis and Butthead, but for different reasons?
I think I think they sequelize it, but I think they do a good job. I think they're going to do something different enough and smart enough. I'm holding out hope that I think it's going to work. It's not just going to be a retread. I think we're going to like it.
All right, Mikey and Streeter, you've been put on notice. So we will be back Saturday night after the show, of course. Hot Take Show, 1:10 a.m. following the broadcast, where John will be with an excellent panel dissecting everything we just saw that night. He'll be back again Monday for the roundtable, and I will be here Wednesday for By the Numbers. John, anything else coming up on the podcast? Talk about the Patreon program, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have our first patron podcast coming out tomorrow for the regular season, where the patrons have voted and they've asked us to do a sketch breakdown. So I got Sammy K on that show. So Sammy and I will break down the sketch selected by the patrons, and we'll review all that on patreon.com/the SNL Network. On the main feed tomorrow on YouTube, we have everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live season 14 premiering. So always get excited when one of those come out and to see people's reactions to our breakdown of that season. So that'll be out tomorrow. And like you said, got a full week of coverage coming up for Nate Bargatze and Coldplay. Very exciting stuff.
Absolutely. The schedule is brutal. We have 10 episodes this year. That means you get at least 30 podcasts from us. So stick around. Brad, where can we check you out, and what's going on over at Not Ready for Primetime Pod?
Yeah, I'm over at the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. Like I said, we're doing a deep dive of the first 5 seasons of SNL. We have new episodes every Tuesday. Yesterday, we just had the season 3 finale. As we said, Jon Schneider was on with us. John's been on 6 times with us. So if you love hearing John talk about SNL, and he knows his stuff, so if you want to go back and hear him talk about the olden years, he has amazing conversations with us about the old days in SNL. We love having John on. Just finished up season 3. We have a couple special interviews coming up in the next few weeks, couple interviews, people we had on, some special episodes, and we're going to kickstart season 4 of SNL in probably end of November.
Can't wait for
that. Can I also shout out, Brad, that your coverage of the episode Steve Martin and the Blues Brothers, potentially the greatest episode ever, was absolutely fantastic. You had to 2-parter it because you had so many great interviews for that one. So if you're going to dive into some old SNL coverage, I think that is a great place to go.
Thank you. Yeah, with the Steve Martin Blues Brothers, I do think it's one of the best episode, if not one of the top 3 over the years. We had Paul Schaefer come on and talk to us. Original writer Marilyn Suzanne Miller was on the show to talk to us, as well as Lou Marini, who played the saxophone in the King Tut bit and later played with the Blues Brothers. So yeah, we had to break that one up into 2. So we have some really great guests. Most of the episodes are Gary and I talking, but we try to, when we get guests, get really good guys like John or some folks from the SNL Hall of Fame, and that Steve Martin episode was special. We really wanted to go do something special for that one, and I think we pulled it off.
Well said. Check it out. We all love the community that we've built here. So good to be back. I mean, By the Numbers, season 50, a lot of pressure. Can't wait for it. We have more coverage. There'll be a lot of these stats on our Instagram and other places. So check out at the SNL Network, Twitter, X, Facebook. What's the other one called? TikTok, that one as well. You can find me at SNL Mike Murray. We, of course, are a presentation of latenighter.com. So good to be podcasting back for our 5th season, the SNN, originally called SNL Stats. And we're still doing SNL Stats, so thanks for sticking with us. Can't wait to see you again. Brad, thanks for making your debut. John, love seeing you as always. And we will see you next time